All right. Well, welcome back to Generation, Bridging the Gap with Rex.
And Eva.
And I am really excited about today's episode, Eva, because we get to tell your story.
We do. It's an exciting one.
Yeah.
Maybe not as long as his, but...
Yeah, not quite as long as mine. There's a good reason for that. I think we had to break the episode of my story into two halves just because obviously it is a little bit longer than yours at this point.
As it should be.
Your 17 years that you have of life experience.
No, your entire episode didn't even touch. Like, it ended in like 95, and that was 10 years before I was born. So
right.
There's like that whole gap.
There's a little bit of a gap, but we're going to fill in the gap today on your life. And again, I'm really excited about it. We mentioned in a previous episode, both of us are adopted. And that's kind of given us a special bond. We've always talked about that very openly, very freely. And I can remember when you were a little girl, you just had this incredible memory, first of all. The things that you remembered even when you were 10, 11, 12, that you would refer back to events, things that happened when you were like 4. And I'm like, how in the world does she remember that? And it was almost like you had a semi-photographic memory. My brain works that way, matter of fact.
I had that now. It would make school a lot easier.
It would make it a lot easier. I'm like, what happened with that? Because you don't...
My memory does not do well some days.
Well, some days.
Some days it's fantastic.
Yeah, some days it's fantastic. You have a great memory. But what's your... Give me a memory that you have as a kid.
Okay, I have two. One about you and one about Mama. Yeah. So, y'all both worked until 5:30, 5:30. And so I was at daycare. And so we lived in our old neighborhood. It had a big mountain. Mm-hmm. And I have this distinct memory of the car going up the mountain, and Mama being on the phone and me trying to tell her something about Tigger. I never told her about Tigger. I just remember trying to tell her about Tigger, but she was on the phone, so I couldn't. And then I have another memory of sitting in your lap on the leopard chair in the living room and playing with my Winnie the Pooh telephone. And I think I was younger than 4 or 5 there, because that's just a distinct memory. It had like this acorn button and a honey pop button, and you could press them, and it was like a telephone. That's all I remember.
Yeah, isn't that wild how your memory works that way? Everything's recorded. Neurosurgeons, I guess, or neurologists, psychologists tell us that everything's recorded. And so anyway, those images are there. So kind of cool.
Yeah.
Leopard chair. What it was, that was a print. Yeah. That was real popular back.
Was. And the red and golds.
Yeah.
Our entire house was red and golds.
Yeah.
Occasional leopards.
And now you think back, it's so weird.
Yeah. And now everything is just
chair. Okay. Yeah. Well, one of my memories is that as a little girl, you loved for us to lay in bed at night, and you always wanted me to tell you a story.
Yep.
And they needed to be long, because if they weren't long enough, you would always go, Daddy, tell me another one.
Yep.
And you always wanted me to read a book. I've got those are favorite memories. Matter of fact, I think we mentioned one that. What's the one you remember?
The only 2 books I remember is Max Lucado's Goodnight Story, and then the Golden Stallion, which we never finished it, but that was one book I remember us trying to get through.
Yeah, I don't know why we didn't finish that, but the wild thing about that is I do not remember that as a boy, but I found that book in some old boxes of things from my childhood. I'm talking about when I was probably 7, 8 years old, and that book was in there, and I have no idea where it came from. Don't remember who gave it to me, but I thought, how cool is this? Yeah. And I like old books anyway, and so we need to put that on our to-do list. You and I have to go back and read the Golden Stallion.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And we bought a movie. I have another memory of Black Friday shopping. Me and Mama always went Black Friday shopping. And we found a movie called The Golden Medallion. Mm-hmm. Was 100% convinced that was about the book. No, a stallion and medallion are 2 very different things.
They're 2 very different things.
So that's another memory.
You remember that.
At Mom and Paul's house.
Okay. Well, Again, one of the things I remember is just your love of stories, the fact that we would lay in bed at night and we would just talk and stories, reading books. And one of the things that I always told you, Eva, is something that Paul, again, my dad that you named Paul, one of the things I would tell you is something that he repeated to me fairly often. And the older I got, the more it meant to me. But Paul would just look at me and he would say, son, and again, I went to live with Paul when I was 7 years old. Him and Ma adopted me at 7. And we had to get used to each other. They had never had children before. Obviously, I'd never had a dad before. So it was really different. It was an adjustment for all of us. But I'm trying to get used to this dad figure in my life. And he was a pretty strict disciplinarian. You know, you remember Paul.
Yep.
And Paul was awesome, but he was strict and he was a disciplinarian, but he loved me. And that's one of the things he left me with. I knew he was for me. I knew he wanted me to be the best that I could possibly be. But one of the things that he would periodically tell me, he would just stop what he was doing and he'd say, son, let me tell you something. He said, if I could pick any little boy in the world to be my son, I would always choose you. And I can't tell you what it did to my heart, what it did to just how I felt about myself as a person and as his son. And then I would repeat that to you because I got it from Paul.
Yep.
And
Which
so
I found out last episode was Paul had told you. I just thought you came up with it.
Oh, you thought I was brilliant enough to come up with that on my own?
Yeah, 100%.
Nope, that came from Paul. And there is a spiritual principle in that, by the way.
Yep.
Every word is a seed.
Yep.
And so there are things that I have said to you over the course of your short life, Eva, that you have said back to me in a different way. And it has made me realize I've been taught all my life, words are seeds. But
Words matter.
When the words do matter and they mean things. But when it comes back to you full circle from your own child, from your own daughter in this case, I can't tell you what it's done to my own belief in the power of words and words are seeds. For instance.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So he would tell me that as a little kid, and it would be, you know, if I could choose any little girl in the world to be my daughter, I would always choose you. And one day, my brilliant self responded with, if I could choose any daddy in the world, I would always choose you. And that was my response to it. And that's always meant the world to me. But it mattered because I would never have said that had he not planted that seed. So.
Yeah, and then for you to bring that seed back to me in the form of a harvest, Eva, I remember that moment, and I cannot tell you again what it did to my heart. And I was like, oh my goodness, words are so, so powerful. So thank you for that. And you, even that particular year, you put that on my birthday, my Christmas card. You remember?
No, I
Matter
do
of
not.
fact, you don't remember that?
I don't remember almost any birthday card I've given you. So.
Well, I can't remember if it was a card or it was a box. I still have it. I'm sentimental. I guarantee you I have a picture of it somewhere. But I think on the cardboard box that whatever the gift was you gave me that year, the gift was what was on the box.
Yeah.
And you wrote that in your own handwriting. If I could choose any daddy in the world, I would always choose you. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So anyway, kid, I love you.
Love you.
You're awesome.
Yeah, if you could see us right now, I'm smiling really big, and he's like looking really nicely, and then we just fist bumped. So that's the whole interaction right now.
Big fist bump on that one. Well, let's talk about your life a little bit, Eva.
Yeah, I don't remember of it.
Yeah, and again, we would lay in bed at night telling the stories, reading the books, and then I would always go, hey, remember, we're the chosen ones. The rest of these kids, their parents just had to put up with them. But you and I, we are chosen. They came after us. Don't ever forget it. And so for our listeners, if you're not adopted, I am so, so sorry. But we love you. But adopted
kids are superior. And we're really humble about it too.
We're awesome.
Yeah.
But We have a friend, Mr. David. Remember, Mr. David was adopted. He was the headmaster
Yes.
at your first elementary school.
Yes.
And he terrorized his brother, who was birth,
Yeah.
to that family.
Yeah.
But Mr. David would terrorize his older brother and say, hey, bro, man, they just got to put up with you. They didn't have any choice. I am the chosen one.
Yeah.
And I remember Miss Bobby used to
Yes.
tell us how it was actually traumatic for the older brother because Mr. David was just merciless in his pursuit of we're the chosen ones.
But it's amazing. I remember that.
It is amazing.
All of those stories are coming back to the front of my mind. So,
And again, for those that are adopted that have experienced it, it's just a wonderful thing, and it's not for every family either. We're kind of having fun with it. Every family situation is different.
absolutely.
Yeah. So for us, adoption has been a wonderful, wonderful miracle for me and for you and for our family.
And I don't have to compete with anyone because it's just me. Well, that's a lie. I have to compete with the dog. She is the favorite child, at least to my mother. But no, I don't have to compete with anyone. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, only children come with some advantages, and you've had those, and so did I. But hey, let's talk about your life. Let's talk about really you won't know this part, how it happened, and I'm going to try to abbreviate this because we don't want to get into a lot of the details. But we actually had a failed adoption. Your mother and I. We adopted a little boy out of Nashville, Tennessee. And Tennessee had a 10-day wait law at the time. You could not take a baby out of state once a mother made a decision to give a child up for adoption. You could not take that baby out of state for 10 days. Well, your mom and I went up. We got selected for an adoption process, and we got that little boy from the hospital, and we went to an extended stay in Nashville.
Yep.
And 3 days later, the birth mother changed her mind.
Yeah.
And so the adoption agency, they came and got the little boy. And I had already come back to Alabama. So your mother was by herself. There were some friends that were on their way to Nashville to be with her. But it was an absolutely devastating experience for your mother. You're there in an extended stay hotel by yourself with what you think is your newborn son. And 3 days later, they come and get him. And so just very devastating, and there a lot of emotion involved in that. But I remember it was months later. Your mom and I were driving down the road, and it's on Interstate 65, I remember. And she just made the statement. She said, I don't know if I will ever be happy again. And as a husband, you don't even know what to say. And I just kept driving. I didn't even look at her because I'm like, it's one of those moments. It's like, hey, whatever you say is probably going to be wrong. It's not going to be the right thing. So just keep driving. If she wants to say some more, she'll say some more. Well, she didn't, and we just continued to drive. So I really thought that was it for us, Eva, with the possibility of children. And then another 6 months goes by, and your mom says, I think I want to try again. And I said, try what? And she said, adoption. And I was floored. I'm like, you would really take a risk on going through this again? And she said, yes, let's do it. And I said, okay. So we went through a different agency that markets prospective adoptive parents nationally. And they actually build a website, and they show that website. They make it available to prospective mothers that are going to put their children up for adoption. And they said, hey, we want you to clearly understand, by the time, because there's so many parents that want to adopt, by the time your website goes live and somebody selects you, it'll probably be at least a year. Okay. Our website went live around the 1st of August. Within 2 weeks, a prospective birth mother, your birth mother, called us, Miss Patty, and said, I like this couple. I like what's presented on their website, and I'd like to have a phone conversation with them. So we were talking to Miss Patty 2 weeks later, and we were floored because we just weren't expecting it. And you were actually due in December. So this is August. Yep. You were due in December. Yep. And so we actually flew out to Wyoming. We met Miss Patty, met her family. It was a great meeting, and we just discussed what each one of us was wanting out of the adoption. Miss Patty was young, and she knew that she could not provide you with the life that she really wanted. And she just liked some of the things she saw that were presented about me and Mom, and she picked us. And I have been so, so grateful all of my life that she made that decision and that she picked us to be your parents. And so that was in September that we flew to Cheyenne. She had an at-risk pregnancy, and so they had to medevac her to Denver in October, and you were born in October, 8 weeks early. You remember any of that? To the day.
To the day. I was supposed to be born December 12th.
Yep.
I was born to the day, 2 months early, which is crazy.
Absolutely. October 12th.
I have the utmost respect for her and her decision she made, knowing that she couldn't provide me the life she wanted for me, and that she couldn't be, she couldn't parent, she wasn't prepared for that. And so rather than having me grow up with a, chaotic household or whatever, she made the right decision to give me to a family that wanted to be parents and that was prepared to be parents. And so I'm very grateful for that. I have the most respect of her.
Yep, me too. She's always been a hero in our life. And, when I talk about my birth mother, her name was Joanne. Even though Joanne died when I was 7, I don't remember a lot about Joanne, and I don't remember a lot about her life. But I know this, the fact that she picked Ma and Pa, I don't know what decision process she went through. I don't know if she had other choices. But the fact that she selected them and that they said yes to take me as their son, I have always honored her because that decision literally changed my life. Joanne did the very best she could in the 7 years that she had me, but Ma and Paul gave me a life that I could only have possibly imagined with a single mom. And so, and my heart when I say that, my heart goes out to every single mom that's out there that did keep their child and is struggling to make ends meet. You may be struggling with disciplining a child, a one-parent home instead of a two-parent home. And our prayers and our thoughts go out to every single mom that's out there doing the very, very best they can for their children. And much honor, much love, much respect to all the single moms.
To every mom.
Yeah, to every mom.
Specifically the single moms.
Every mom. It's a big deal to be a mom. And so we've always honored Joanne in my case and Miss Patty in your case, because again, our lives have been the better for it. So you're born as a preemie. You came in at 3 pounds, 12 ounces. You were long, you were tall.
Yeah, 17 inches.
Yeah, we've got that picture of you in the NICU, and I think it's really great. Matter of fact, one of the cool memories that I have about your birth, grandmother, we were at this family dinner back in September before you were actually born, and your mother's all in. Lisa's all in on this adoption, and this is our kid in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Well, I'm kind of taking it in because I knew we had the disappointment from Nashville. I'm kind of guarding my heart a little bit, and I'm very outgoing. I love people. Your mom's a party waiting to happen, but I can be a little reserved at times. And so at this big family dinner, I'm kind of reserved. I'm guarding my heart and I'm checking this thing out. Well, Mom, she is all in. She is loving on the family. She's telling stories. And your grandmother looks down, and we had split up. Lisa's on one end, I'm on the other end. Yeah. And I'll never forget, Marcy is your grandmother's name. She looked down at the table at me and she said, "Man, I'm really enjoying this." And she looked at your mom, Lisa, and said, "I love you. You're incredible. You're awesome." And then she pointed down at the end of the table toward me and she said, "Now I'm not so sure about you yet." And of course, everybody laughed. I laughed, but I thought, okay, she's kind of picked something up here that I'm guarding my heart. But here's the point. When I walked in that hospital room, when we knew that Miss Patty was in labor with you, and we immediately got on a plane, flew to Denver, got there just hours after your birth. When I walked in that room and I saw you, I broke out in the biggest grin that I think I've ever had in my life. And Marcy looked at me and she simply said, she pointed at me. She said, "That's what I was looking for." And so you were my daughter from that moment.
Yep.
And our life has been the better and it's been changed. And so that's kind of how you got here. You are a Denver, Colorado girl.
Yes, but I don't like the cold. No, it's all right. But I think that adoption in some families it's a struggle for the kids, right? Like you always hear about how adoption and the kids struggle with feeling like right in their place and things. But I feel like in my childhood, I'm very grateful for the fact that I felt like I would never have a place anywhere else and that was my home. Like I could never imagine that like I could have had another life. Like unless Miss Patty had made that decision, I could have had a different in life. And so but I think that for me, y'all were always very open. Y'all never hid the fact that I was adopted. And unfortunately, I have a story to tell.
Okay, great.
But this is about elementary school. Jake, if you're out there, I'm very sorry. But I always knew I was adopted. And he did not. He did not know he was adopted. It was very clear. Later, we found out he was, I think, from Guatemala.
Guatemala,
yeah,
yes.
Guatemala. And he looked nothing like his parents. I automatically assumed that he knew he was adopted. And so one day, I think on the playground, we're talking, and I said, "Yeah, I love being adopted, like me and Jake." And he was like, "What?" And then my parents get a phone call that night about,
yes, we did.
he did not know. And I was like, see, that they were always very open. And I felt like that's a big difference. Like adoption can go in so many ways. And I think that's why we all have unique paths, is because every kid has a different story. Like you were adopted at 7, I was adopted at birth. There's interrace, there's all these kind of factors playing into it. But I think the thing that I enjoy the most about it is what Mama has always said, which was we always wanted you to know, because if we didn't let you know, we didn't want you to question the truth of other things we had told you, thinking we had lied to you your entire life about being adopted. And so like the whole thing, we didn't want you to question whether things we had told you about truth and beliefs and different things were untrue because we had lied to you about something so big in your life. And I have the most respect for that. And I highly encourage that. I know that's not going to work in every situation, but I feel like it has a better outcome trust-wise, but that's just my opinion on it.
And I think every family has to come to that realization on their own. And we're not criticizing or condemning anyone if they did it differently. But for us, that's just the way we chose to do it. And in all honesty, it comes from some things that I learned from Paul early on. And this is a cool story that people will probably relate to, at least to a degree. When Paul was 8 years old, Paul still believed in Santa Claus. And if we have listeners that still believe in Santa Claus, please close your ears for the next couple of minutes. But Paul still believed in Santa Claus at 8. And one of his sisters told him one day, "Hey, you do know that there is no Santa Claus, right?" And Paul was devastated. He couldn't believe it. And he was like, well, if I believed that, he took this truth with him into ministry. And the premise was, if I believed that wholeheartedly for 8 years, what else have I believed that is not correct? Yeah. And Paul really spent his whole life on a search for truth. But the other piece of it is that he also asked the question, or he made the statement, my sister told me something that was true. When she told me that there's no Santa Claus, that's a true statement, but she didn't tell me the whole truth. And he said the truth of Christmas and the birth of Christ and the ability for us to be saved, that's a wonderful truth and it's a wonderful story, but my sister just happened to leave some details out. And so it impacted Paul tremendously his entire life, and he passed that to me. We passed that to you, and it's just the way we've chosen, hey, let's tell the truth about everything.
Yep, and keep the ears closed about Santa, because I have a story about it. So another part of never lying was they never like really made me believe in Santa or the Tooth Fairy. I knew that when I lost a tooth, I got some money under my pillow. But I was in Target as like a 4-year-old with my mother. And in my Southern 4-year-old sassy self, I asked her, Mama, if Santa makes all the toys, why do they sell them in Target? And I wish I still had that brilliance, because I put that together in the Target toys aisle. And that, like, it was never, like, Santa was never a big deal. I get my picture with Santa every year, like, to this day, because my mother's a little obsessed with Santa. But I never had that belief. And so I was never really questioning what have they told me that isn't true? What have they told me that is true? Christmas was always about, Christ's story. Santa was just a fun little character of it. Like, he was playing like a part of the Christmas cheer, but he was never the actual story or the truth. And so I think that was a big impactful thing in my life that still, like, they've always been open. Like, if I ask a question, I generally get an answer about it, just because they've always wanted to be truthful with me. So
absolutely. And we've told you that about our own mistakes and our own shortcomings also. If there's a question that you want to ask about when we were teenagers, and you've asked us before, hey, did you ever do this? Did you ever make the mistake of this?
Yeah.
And we've been very open with you in our failures.
Yep.
And fortunately, they haven't been a lot, but failure is failure.
Yeah.
And mistakes are mistakes.
It's also let me see y'all in a view. Like, I still see y'all as my heroes. Y'all are my best friends. That's the side effect of being homeschooled and an only child. Your parents are your best friends. I think it's a pretty great side effect, but some may disagree. But I think that is also removed that a lot of kids may hold that their parents are perfect and can do no wrong. When you ask those questions, that your parents make mistakes. And that's also allowed me to be more, like, graceful and forgiving when they make mistakes parenting and when I make mistakes, because I'm like, oh, like, my parents made mistakes. There's still these great people today. This is not a life-altering mistake, or this isn't going, because, like, look how good they are, and they still made the same mistakes that I made. And so I think that it's a really big thing. It's set a very good example of that your heroes may not be perfect, but they can still show you how to get past your mistakes. And so
that's a great point. And I think we want to wrap this episode up.
Yep.
I know that we haven't gotten into a lot of details about your life.
We can do
another
age 2 to 17.
Yeah. So we can do another episode. Yes. But to close this out, here's something that just kind of dawned on me as we were talking. Yeah, so that's a great point, and that just kind of reminded me of something. I got this flash through my brain about, the way that we have tried to parent you versus the way Ma and Paul parented me specifically. Again, Paul was a disciplinarian. He was a World War II veteran. I mean, I just thought he was just hung the sun and the moon. And I'm writing a book about him. He just impacted my life tremendously. But because Paul was such a disciplinarian, he basically, when he said something, brother, you better get to stepping, and you better step right now. And I was a very compliant child because I came out of this horrendous situation, and I'm just trying to figure things out. And the moment I stepped into his house, I just knew, hey, this dude is bigger than life, and you better kind of get in line and follow the rules and do what he says and just figure life out. I'm trying to recover from the trauma of losing the 3 people that I lived with. And so there's that dynamic going on. But again, when you came along, I realized very quickly that principles are the same, but children, all of us are different, and we respond differently. And I realized that we were going to have to parent you in a different way. And one of the first indicators I got of this is I remember you would tend to spill your milk occasionally as a 4 and 5 year old. And one day I had just poured you some milk. And as I was pouring it, I said, Eva, now don't knock this milk over. And not 10 seconds after I poured the milk, what'd you do?
I spilled the
milk.
milk.
You spilled the milk everywhere. And I slammed my hand down on the counter, and it shocked you because, it was just this loud pop. And I slammed it down, and I just said, and I barely raised my voice, but enough that it upset you. And I said, Eva, what did I just tell you? And you broke out in this big crocodile tears. And I could tell you were just devastated that I had slapped my hand down on the counter, that I had raised my voice. And I don't know if you remember this, but I immediately scooped you up. I knelt down in the floor and I scooped you up in my arms, and I just held you tight. And I said, please forgive me. I said, I am so sorry that I raised my voice and that I slapped my hand on the table. I said, it is totally okay that you spilled the milk. And in that moment, I just realized, hey, kids are different. And this is a daughter. This is not a son. Yeah. There was a different relationship there.
I also cried anytime someone raised their voice at me for like 10 years. So
yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
And which we'll learn more about in the next episode.
We'll learn more about in the next episode. Yep. So hopefully that was a good episode. Yep, I enjoyed that.
So. Yeah. Getting to know the foundation of my life. So.
Absolutely. And so as we go on, we're going to answer specific questions about parenting, what it is.
Sorry, our
dog is here today. Hey, Dakota. So we're going to answer specific questions at the end of each episode just about parent-teen relationships, what's going on in current culture. But in the meantime, the main goal is to always be able to talk from generation to generation.
Hey, if you enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts and check us out on our socials. It's G2G_podcast. And on Facebook, it's Generation to Generation. Follow us and it'll let you know when we post a new episode. Have a good day.